Hopefully it'll resonate with many of the players here, both in terms of folks that are building diagnostics as well as the service providers. We think we create an interesting ecosystem to advance it. We'll come back to it in a minute. But I'm going to move over to Michael Parrish. He's the chief of acquisition for the VA. He's the big thinker. And we're going to come back to Michael, and he's going to share a little bit about his experiences and how we can best engage the VA in terms of your innovation. Next to him is Kit Teague, and Kit's the discovery. He's out searching for those innovations for the VA and how we keep our veterans active and going forward. And of course, we have here Kristopher Parker. He's the one that actually executes on this. He's the one that deploys some of the big picture visions that Michael presents on the table. So we're gonna allow each of these individuals to, again, introduce themselves and their mission and what they want to accomplish in context of you and how you can best play and engage both MTEC, which I'll explain in a moment, as well as the VA. MTEC is funded by the DoD, specifically the U.S. Army Research and Development Command. We focus on trying to accelerate and create efficiencies for our primary sponsor, and that's the DoD, specifically the Army, over the past half a dozen to almost a decade. And we focus on all the therapeutic areas, infectious disease, diagnostics, in which we work with our counterparts in the DoD of what are their needs, what's best for our soldiers, how do we keep our soldiers engaged, how do we keep them healthy, how do we create high performers? And we put these solicitations together and identify the best of breed players to come in and work with us. We provide non-dilutive funding with particular focus on prototype development, going into phase 1, phase 2. A very crucial time, a time when sometimes it's hard to raise money. But these non-dilutive dollars will hopefully not only advance your cause, but then begins to tee you up for the private sector. Because we want your innovation not only to impact upon our needs to protect and help our troopers remain engaged and healthy, but we want your products to spill over into the private sector and benefit the taxpayers directly. So MTEC, over the past half a dozen plus years, we think we've done an okay job. For every dollar of the taxpayers' money, through the blessing of the DoD, that we help to invest in biotech companies, the private sector came in and gave $1.50 to upwards to $4, depending on how you cut the metrics, in validating our quote-unquote non-dilutive investment. So we think we're doing an okay job at being good stewards of the DoD's money. That's point one. 2, our membership is about 700 members today. And of that membership, about half of them are the small companies, the nascent companies, the ones that are at the kind of cutting edge of new innovation. Another subset is the universities, and of course the large players. And within that group, we have another set of players. And those players are our service players. So the service players do pay attention because these folks need the back office, whether it be IP support, whether it be accounting, whatever it may take to advance. While they're focusing on the science, you're helping them get through that bridge to the next level of maturity. And so that's the MTEC model. In short, we welcome you to reach out. My colleague here is Rick, who runs commercialization, to reach out to us, take a look at the site. We can walk you through the mechanics. So let me turn you over to our VA partners. Michael, as I mentioned, he thinks big. He's the creative guy that is looking and create and how do we take care of our vets. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael. Michael, please.
Thanks, Shawn. So I'm Mike Parrish. I'm the presidentially appointed as our Chief Acquisition Officer for the VA, and that's a nice way of saying I'm the temp for VA, and I'm also the troublemaker that comes up with the crazy ideas, and these two have to execute that along with the rest of the team. But before I start, let me ask: do we have any veterans in here? Awesome. Have you all signed up for your benefits? Good. And of all of you here, because I know I've come from your world. I used to work in GE, and I'm a retired Army aviator, and so I've done a lot of R&D work on the weapons side. And have played on the research side of trying to get business with the government. How many of you have worked with government before, or actually tried to get contracts with government before? So we know it's a painful process. So, and on the DoD side, there's a phrase called the Valley of Death, and we say that's where good ideas go to die. And so I've grown up there, and and the reason I'm in this role is trying to help break that cycle of new ideas and just, they're going to die. So the main mission, my big effort is trying to do that fusion of acquisition and innovation and be able to scale your new ideas to be able to become a mainstream product. So talking innovation in VA, we are the largest integrated healthcare system probably in the world. So we have 9 million plus patients out of 22 million of us veterans. We've been doing a really good job for all those veterans who know the pain and suffering of some of the old VA problems. Is I say it's not our parents' VA anymore, because we are now giving more benefits and more health care to more veterans than ever before. And so we're really about pushing the envelope on doing a lot of innovative ideas. And so our challenge is to be able to take those ideas and move forward. So you may or may not have known that VA back in the 50s, we were the inventors of the pacemaker. We were the first telehealth appointment back in 1967. Lung transplants, all these things were done at the VA. But in federal government, where government used to be the lead investor, if you will, for new innovations, we've lost that edge in government, and we've gotten to the $800 toilet seats and the over-engineering of things. And so I'm one that's inside trying to break that mold and saying, we in government can no longer afford to do that, and we need all of you as the innovators and the new ideas, especially in the medical space and the life sciences space, to tell us what that's all about. And so we're pushing the envelope to help you all either incubate or grow or get to scale into the VA. The first thing that, and I'll have Kit talk more in detail about that, is the idea of a product that I invented. It's called pathfinder.va.gov. Anybody heard of that or seen it? So we've done really good, and that's where I actually call it the fusion of acquisition and innovation. We've done a really good job on the acquisition side, on the sales side. We're getting better, right, Kit, on the innovation side. So I encourage you all, if you've not looked at that, it also helps those who've never done business with government. It's an easy-to-use, intelligent, and integrated system to be able to learn how challenging it is in government acquisition. So I'll end with just a story of my observations. I used to work at DARPA and other places of government research. So there's everybody watched the end of the movie Indiana Jones? I call this the Indiana Jones effect. Remember, at the very end of Indiana Jones, the Ark of the Covenant, pretty big deal for us Christians, got rolled into a warehouse, right? And that to me is a good cliche for how government intellectual property is done, because currently people spend more time doing the publishing or perishing, and they just do R&D for R&D's sake. And I'm here to tell you that we're breaking that Valley of Death mold to be able to do what I call strategic innovation. And what that does is starts with these guys and teams from the very new idea, from that breadboarding and that prototyping, to think strategically how something, a new product, can actually grow into a scalable product, a mainstream product for all of VA. And we'll go into more details later, but I really don't want us to have that Indiana Jones effect anymore, especially with the VA. So I'll pass it to Kit.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kit Teague. I'm the Executive Director for Veterans Health Administration Innovation Ecosystem. I'm not a veteran, but I got the bad haircut. And, I've been with the VA for like 20 years. 11 of those years have been spent in innovation. And I always like to tell the people, the story of, I've worked at every level of the organization. I've worked at the local level, at the medical center level. I've worked at the regional level, and I've worked at the national level. So I've basically seen it all. And part of that time I've spent in the Bermuda Triangle of VA, which we call human resources, IT, and contracting, which contracted you guys, right? Okay. But, with the innovation ecosystem, we have a number of different programs and portfolios that are designed to help facilitate healthcare innovation across VHA, all the way from early stage ideas of our frontline employees to scaling across the enterprise. And one of the other big things that we do is community building. We do a lot of external collaborations and partnerships. And what Mike was talking about as far as Pathfinder, it's a tool. It's like a digital concierge front door for folks externally that want to either sell to VA on the acquisition side, or they want to innovate with the VA on our side. And what happens is you go on this site, it asks you a few leading questions about, it tells you a little bit about VA, what we have available. We have a number of suite of assets that can be utilized by companies that are early stage, pre-commercial, and then also, companies that have come to commercialization and are trying to get their foot into a medical center or a healthcare system. And, we've got, let's see, SMEs from all walks of every clinical subspecialty you can think of is in the VA. We've got data, some of the best data in the world. We've got a research infrastructure that's funded at $1 billion a year. We've got veterans that are more than happy to provide feedback on different products. We've got 172 medical centers that you can pilot some of this technology at. And so those assets are what VA has to offer all of you that may be interested in taking advantage of those, but you need to go to Pathfinder, answer a few questions. It does an intake. What happens, it comes to my team, and we have folks that triage it, and we have a community of about 400 SMEs throughout the country that are clinical, that are technical, that are administrative, that depending on what your submissions is, we say, these are the folks that, we need to get feedback from. And so we send your submission to them, they provide feedback, and then it's either a go or a no-go decision from us. If it's a go decision, we reach out to you and say, hey, let's figure out how to do a collaboration together. We'll help walk you through the process. If it's a no-go, we're going to provide that feedback to you of why it's a no-go, and so you can recalibrate. And so we work with, I think right now we've got 60-something CRADAs with different companies. Is there anybody in this room that has a CRADA with us? Okay, we got some. So, we're looking for any technologies that can benefit our veterans. We cast a wide net, but it's, we have finite resources on what we can do. But if you have something that's going to meet the needs of our veterans, we're all about it. So.
All right, Chris Parker here. So unlike, so I've been with the VA for about 3 years, about the same amount of time as Mike. I'm currently the executive director at the Strategic Acquisition Center, and just recently took on the acting duties over at the National Acquisition Center. So I've got 2 out of the 3 strategic acquisition centers at the VA right now, which is proving to be kind of interesting from the sense of overlap in programs. Things like prosthetics are bought by multiple activities. My job, the way I look at it is, hey, I came from DOD, 30-year Navy vet, bought any kind of system you can imagine on the Navy side, aircraft platforms, surface platforms, intel platforms, and the like. Most of those on cutting edge technology sorts of things and trying to get them into market for competition as quickly as possible. So good fit sort of with the VA. I'd never bought any healthcare stuff, but I knew the innovation side. So coming to the VA, massive ecosystem across several ecosystems. Innovation is one of the interest spots in every single one of our product lines, right? Everyone wants the latest and greatest technologies out there. The challenge is how to buy them. The programmatics typically don't exist in the innovation space inside a lot of the government spots. The DARPA's out there, things like that. In the VA, we're having a hard time kind of piecing all that together. We're really good at buying things where there's a demand signal out of clinicians, things that are on formularies, things that, all the orthopedists want a specific thing. Great, we can go buy that at the enterprise level. So as we're looking at some of our ecosystems of acquisitions out there, things like community care, telehealth, we buy a lot of the prosthetics and the like, is what are the similarities in how we buy stuff across those? How do we kind of tie in to where a kid is coming from and some of the ideas that Mike is coming up with? How do you turn that into an acquisition? So my organization has program management folks, financial folks, to try to turn something that typically is a bright idea coming out of somewhere, and I'll call it the bright idea tree from Mike sometimes, is how do you turn that into a demand signal that turns into an acquisition? So we try to negotiate. Government contracting is very complicated, right? So we try to work with the programs to establish an acquisition that makes sense, that's competed typically, or we use unique authorities that are granted to the VA from Congress to buy specific items. We have specific prosthetics authorities that a lot of folks just don't know exist. But the whole idea is we have authorities to be able to look for those unique, tailored solutions to end up with the best outcome for our veterans. And so we're always trying to find the best way to kind of create that mix. So that's kind of my job in this space, is how do I turn it from great idea to great interest from certain communities inside the clinician space into now we're buying it and getting it to the front line as soon as possible. So I think that covers the full range of that ecosystem. So, yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you. I'm going to go right to the audience. You kind of got a primer here. Questions? Yes, sir.
Thanks so much. Brett Potts from Midcount Partners. Thank you all for coming and speaking to this group. Chris, you mentioned demand signals from clinicians. how do the entrepreneurs know what those demand signals are?
That's what KIT is trying to solve right now, right? So, because if you ask, 30 heart surgeons what the best product is, they're going to get 30 opinions, like lawyers, right? This is what I'm finding. So you need some sort of a central management of some of those clinical demand signals. What I find is that of the programs at VA, probably the prosthetics folks are the most developed in that space. They hold industry days, they all get together, they make determinations on what product lines they want to pursue. If they're interested in pursuing it, we get it on contract really rapidly, and we're able to get that out into the field. So having things like procurement-ready companies, we can talk a little bit about that if anyone's really interested. Things like you have FDA approval, you have a DUNS number, you have all these, you're registered in SAM, all that neat stuff. Those are the sort of things that help speed the process. And if the company has gone about getting onto a federal supply schedule or something like that in the meantime, that speeds our ability to move to a strategic contract across VA. So, and in those unique cases where it's something that's not on that formulary that a specific clinician wants, sometimes we can even reach in and use special authorities in that space. So there's no easy answer to this. I think what we're trying to figure out is how do you cut away from the idea of you have 172 medical centers? How do you go to one point to introduce your innovation as opposed to trying to market to 172 different medical centers? So.
Yeah, and I was going to reinforce exactly that last part that Chris had mentioned, is I've seen horror stories that your peers and compatriots are trying to sell and try to find 172 different champions, and that makes no sense, and that's what I'm here to say. We're trying to stop that. So if you're doing that, I recommend strongly talking to us to help get that worked out, because the scale part, and just to add to the leverages, we buy $56 billion annually of stuff. So that looks good, but it's hard getting there to that point, and that's where we want to try to help work with you to figure that out to a single enterprise-wide solution. Good.
Perfect. Yes, ma'am.
Sydney, CEO and co-founder of Vessel Prosthetics. Sydney, CEO and co-founder of Vessel Prosthetics, and I have the Pathfinder is fantastic, very easy to navigate. Really enjoy that, and then we're working on a CRADA as well. So it's spectacular to see the support that is existing at each of the stages of a company's life cycle, which I think is fantastic. Are there pathways to get from one of these to the next? So once we've started a CRADA, is there a way to move kind of easily to what that next stage would be, and then to acquisition after that?
Yeah, I'll cover that. So the CRADA is the first step. It helps to get you in the door of the VA. I mean, you can go and try to sell to VA, and as Mike was talking about, going to like 172 VA medical centers because we're not doing centralized buying as effective as we could. But I think what actually gets you in the door with the VA is doing some kind of collaboration or partnership. It gets your product introduced into the VA, gets it in the hands of the folks that are going to be using it, not only the providers, but also the veterans. They can see, they can touch, they can feel, they can get to know it. And if the collaboration is fruitful, that means that at the end of it, we validated the efficacy of the approach and the product. There's going to be a demand signal, to Chris's point, that's going to come to him and say, hey, we tried this under a CRADA. We really like this. What can we do to get this in the hands of our providers and veterans? And then that's when the real conversation starts strategically about how to scale it, not only for those providers, but the rest of the enterprise.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me just add, just to clarify for those who don't know, a CRADA is a cooperative research and development agreement. So that's a deal where you come in and you provide your wares, we provide sweat equity or feedback for you and help you commercialize your product.
You want to go first? Go ahead. Oh, perfect. David Haggerty, co-founder and CEO of Vine Medical. We are working pretty closely with DoD and active duty medical providers. And I guess I have two questions. One, how does VA think about helping support the implementation of products that will ultimately help the warfighter, the active warfighter? And two, do CRADAs in one vertical of the DoD or the military apparatus apply to other verticals in the military apparatus?
So I'll put my chip on my shoulder, being an old DoD guy. The mission of Department of Defense is to fight and win our nation's wars. So from a medical space, that's a third tier, combat service support level effort. The mission of VA is to care for those who bore the brunt of battle. So, when you come to a scalable space, I'd encourage VA first. But one of the things we're also trying to fix is that government-wide collaboration, not just with DoD and VA, but also with HHS and this ARPA-H new group and some of that stuff. So, We're working through that, and it's still a work in progress. But these kind of things to know about it's important that with awareness with these kind of events and going through Pathfinder, we'll know what you're doing. Then we can also work together, so we're not duplicating or competing with each other, if you will.
Yeah, and we're congressionally mandated actually to do more cooperative buying. So in some cases, things like HTME, high-tech medical equipment, we have partnering contracts where we write part of the portfolio of contracts, DoD does the other part of the portfolio. So a lot of coordination meetings between the two. Some of the places where you'd like to see it as a retiring vet, so say I had a CPAP machine as active duty. As I rolled into VA, shouldn't I have the same machine? Shouldn't I have the same information, all the informatics that I had as a, someone in DoD? Everyone in DoD ends up in the VA, right? So wouldn't it make sense for all that stuff to be able to communicate with, so all that passes over automatically into the VA space? That's what we're trying to fix, because those systems are not the same. Some of the medical devices I had on active duty when I retired, I had to throw them away and get new ones issued by the VA because they were different, supported differently. And that's a shame. So, yep.
Rick Satcher with Shawn at MTEC. I'm curious to know how you're prioritizing the innovation that you need. Hear about, of course, the prosthetics you mentioned, but mental health is huge. So I'm curious to know if you can comment on how you're prioritizing. There's a lot of competing priorities, right?
No, there absolutely is. And, the veteran health conditions are a lot of the same health conditions as the general public. However, there's some things that the veteran population experiences more that VA focuses in on more. Mental health and suicide prevention, TBI, polytrauma, PTSD, spinal cord injury, prosthetics. Those are the 6 that we are that's our big priorities. Everything else is kind of gravy after that. But if we focus on those, that's the big picture for us. I mean, there's a lot of things that we have that are more prevalent in the veteran population, like diabetes, some heart issues, cancer. All of those things are also important, but the 6 that I just told you are probably the big ones for us.
Hi, Manny Villafana, Medical 21. We are developing products in which we are approaching the Mayo Clinics, Cleveland Clinics, Minneapolis Heart Institute, a variety of hospitals to participate in a clinical trial on Class 3 devices, implantable devices. Does the VA system have a means by which they too would participate, number one? And the second question is, do we have an advantage in going to the VA versus going to another standard institution? Not that any of these are standard, but you know what I mean. In other words, do we have an advantage going through you as it relates to the long timetables of the FDA?
Do you want to talk about that, Beth, and the FDA?
Yeah. So I'll take this. Yes, we can be a clinical trial partner. And yes, there is advantage going through the VA. We have special relationships. Being a federal agency, we have special relationships with other federal agencies. For instance, we have a office that's a sister office to us. It's called Office of Advanced Manufacturing. And they do a lot of 3D printing and prototyping and medical device design. And the hub is up in Seattle. Well, the FDA has folks that are embedded there at the Seattle facility. And they help kind of traverse kind of the regulatory hurdles that the FDA has. And it's a very collaborative relationship. And so I would say that, there is advantage coming to VA, and we do a lot of clinical trials, not only on, products, but also pharmaceuticals. So it's a good place to be for clinical trials.
Don't hide, I'm going to find you.
And being a user of implants, while most veterans have a lot of stuff, we always encourage the better kind of equipment. So,
Other questions? Kit, I'm going to come back to you. You mentioned the pilot. I'm going to keep coming back to the clinical because we encounter this all the time at MTEC, that we're going through that transitional phase for prototyping. Walk us through, aside from the portal and the template used. Walk us through the economics of that. Who's paying for what? Some of these companies are, as we know, we're all fragile in some of our early stages in growing these companies. Help us understand, aside from the clinical, walk us through with some granularity, how do we collaborate and share that cost?
Yeah. So basically, when we do a cooperative research and development agreement, we're both sharing in the cost. VA sees value in whatever product it is we decide to do a cooperative research and development agreement on. They see the value for the VA, they see the value for the veteran. So they're willing to put in resources, sweat equity, all those things to help move this product or this company along in the life cycle to see if it's efficacious. What we're asking for the companies is bring your business development dollars. Bring the product to be available for the pilots, and work with us in the trenches to get the insights that we need to be able to validate whatever we're doing. And so, we're bringing things, you're bringing things, we're bringing them together for a common purpose. So yes, there's investment from the companies. We expect you to either, bring that from your VCs, bring that from whatever capital you've raised other means, but it's something we're doing together collaboratively for the greater good.
Yeah, and I'll just add, coming from my old GE days when we did this, I worked for Jack Welch, and we had a phrase that said we want to acquire the leading edge, not the bleeding edge. Let you all work through all the pain and suffering of the breadboards and all the development work, and then we at GE would scale that, and that's Mike talking. I think what gives us a unique advantage on the VA side is we also have funds. We want to get more, obviously, but we want to commit funds to help you do that R&D effort and co-develop a product. We would be co-owners, if you will, with whatever system you're doing, depending on what phase of development you are in the system, and that's how we want to kind of do that. So there's a phrase, if you're not familiar in government, that DoD has better than us that we're working on is small business innovative research. And there's different little levels of funding. We're doing a bunch of tech sprints that Kit alluded to earlier, and there's places that you can find these things through what's called challenge.gov or sam.gov. By law, every contract government does in guarantee you'll need a full-time person. I had a team doing this when I was playing CEO, but sam.gov, every contract and every notice contractually has to go into sam.gov. Challenge.gov, and I think there's also a grants.gov, are side sister websites for government funding of different types of efforts. And we're trying to still work through that, so it's still a labor of love and a process to be able to get better. But there are funds available to help with that co-development.
One more for you. Brett Potts from Bootcamp Partners again. I'm wondering about if you have any plans for focus groups for clinicians. Let's say that we had a group of cardiologists. Are there focus group plans kind of coming along where we could get some of these folks in front of them?
You're preaching my gospel because we jokingly talk about a thing called Mike Speed. Mike's like, I'm in the business of the impossible. But one thing we want to do more of, which we do and have done before, is called Reverse Industry Days. And that's where you all can come. And we're actually talking about setting this up through Chris's team, right, Chris, is having these Reverse Industry Days on specific areas like prosthetics or like pharmaceuticals or like high-tech equipment. But it's having you all come and show us. Whereas industry days would be we're preaching to you all here's what we need. But reverse industry days, you come, it's almost like these speed dating things you're doing here, but it's focused on us in the VA. So you come in and give those ideas. So we want to do more of that, and we're going to start aggressively doing that in the summer, right, Chris?
Hopefully even sooner than that, depending on the topic. We've done a few of them for things like community health, community care, things like that, telehealth. We did one last year. And the hard spot is, of course, on the acquisition side, that helps me tremendously because it kind of helps the programs formulate their approach, right? They get an idea of what's out there in the market, helps them make the points of contact they're going to need, trying to determine, hey, how does industry procure this sort of stuff? And that's the sort of communication that we're looking for is when we hold these events, it really is pretty broad. And they're announced typically on SAM. And the whole idea is to come with your, some crazy ideas too, as far as, hey, if you could revolutionize this, here's the way to do it. Here's a better way to buy. Why do you divide your regions in a specific way? Why do we have those sorts of discussions with industry just to kind of try to figure out, hey, are we buying this the right way? If you've got a suggestion, bring it up at one of those events. We have pretty thick skin. I do, at least. I don't know. But we want to be told, hey, you're buying this wrong. You could save millions, billions in some cases. Okay, well, tell me how that really works out. Show me the math. And, we're willing to have those sort of conversations. But the whole, really, the best idea that comes out of those is, what is the latest and greatest thing? How should we buy it? And then how do we kind of position the VA to actually use the authorities that we have, turn it into programmatics, and then go field it quickly so we can get some better outcomes we're looking for. So that's the magic in it. So, but it's the, how do you get it? Which cardiologist are you going to invite? That first one, right? That's the real question, right? Prosthetics has it figured out. Some of the other ones we're working on right now. Who's invited to the show, and can they speak for the whole community? And, we're still trying to figure that out in some commodity areas.
Just to add to that, at MTEC, we put out solicitations. We don't always have it right. Even though we're working hand in glove with our primary sponsor, recent one just came out yesterday on oral health. The genesis of that came about maybe 6-7 months ago, and the requirements weren't necessarily aligned with many of the players that could meaningfully contribute. So we pushed that out there, which they become the co-authors. Bring it back in under a white paper, repackage, bring it back out as a solicitation. And in doing that, you bring out the best of breed players too. Yes, they're authors of the requirements, but they're already in the space. And so are already thought leaders in that particular space. And so it's a different way of approaching it, but how do we bring some of these technologies in that we may not have really articulated in these solicitations? So we're trying to be a little bit more dynamic and reach out to the players here, pick up the phone, call us. If we don't have the right idea or we're not prioritizing correctly, give us a call. We take all the phone calls, we take the meetings, we listen to our biotech partners, because at the end of the day, this innovation is coming from this community here and how it helps our troopers. So just a thought to consider.
And that's actually important for anyone doing business with government. Don't hesitate to reach out to whoever it is that you're talking to. One of the things we're trying to change the mode in VA is the dictatorial, we're government, we're throwing something over the fence. So we want to do exactly that. Do draft RFPs, do our request for information. If you see those, send in your information. And we, obviously we're sensitive to any of your secret sauce or any of your intellectual property or competitive advantages. But that's where you can schedule one-on-one meetings with us and to be able to do that, and we'll keep things in confidence. But if we don't hear from you, then we don't know what you have to offer, and that's the big takeaway. So don't be afraid to talk to Big Brother, if you will. So
That's great, Michael.
we're like you guys.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for a great session. Could you talk a little bit about the department's approach to remote patient monitoring, status of telehealth development, wearables outside of the facility, and as you're thinking about, and people are thinking about chronic management of patients and so forth. So it's a little bit of a broad question. I'm sorry, but it's a pretty broad topic.
I can take a partial stab, and then I'll turn it over to Kit. But so one of the contracts that we support, of course, the telehealth program. And there's an element of telehealth as far as sharing expertise inside the VA for patients that may be in Spokane, Washington, and getting seen by someone who's in Bethesda, Maryland, right? So there's some of that going on as far as sharing inside the VA network and what devices, long-term measurements and stuff like that. There's a lot of existing technology in that space. Then there's the home wearables, which is a whole new, it's not really a new field, I guess, but some of the weird things, you see the rings that can measure all sorts of weird things for you, right? I mean, there's amazing technology that's out there. They're struggling right now to try to figure out which of those devices are the right things to put out there for veterans. And do they really connect in the same way? Are they additive to the overall ecosystem of things you're trying to monitor and measure? And so they're going through a process where the telehealth group meets periodically to try to figure out, do I have the right mix of home monitoring devices? Do they all have to connect to an iOS device, which is kind of the model right now? Is that the right model for the future? That's a great question. I don't know. I won't say one way or the other. I don't have an opinion yet. But that is there are people looking at this continuously inside the telehealth space, because I refer these things all the time. You probably do too, Kit, right? Is the idea there's a group of clinicians that try to figure out what's that supposed to look like? Isn't there a lot more that can be done? Yes, the answer is of course. Because the big challenge we have at the VA is with all the legislation that's come over across the last few years about drive times and availability. What about rural health? I mean, the veteran can't always get, especially if you're talking a 90-year-old World War II vet, they can't get to the clinic every 2 weeks for this monitoring thing, this blood test, whatever the thing is. How do you monitor them better? How do you decrease that need for in-person visits so that you can actually do an entire health check? What are all those devices, and how do they stay interconnected, and what do you do that through? So yeah, huge challenge. I mean, so the aperture's wide open, looking for what's that next great device, what's that next thing that will do multiple things and connect into, and of course there's always the IT. How does it all connect into the Borg? But I think that's I would say the aperture is wide open in that space, and you probably know more about it from the ecosystem as far as what some of the new techs are.
Yeah, we've been working on this for a number of years. It got really accelerated during COVID. And, one of the areas that we really focus pretty hard on is remote temperature monitoring for diabetics with, potential for foot ulcers and downstream amputations. And we found a number of different solutions during COVID that could help reduce that. The problems that we experienced were, figuring out just how many patients we have with potential issues or risks there, finding out, trying to figure out exactly what level of risk do we prescribe the intervention for. The other issue that we kind of dealt with was trying to figure out what are the best care models to surround those types of solutions. Another thing is the VA going to actually do the monitoring, or we're going to outsource the monitoring to the company? And that was a really interesting one. And then to Chris's point, the integration piece, that data coming back and coming back into the medical record as opposed to some standalone portal that you've got to check. And providers are just getting inundated with these one-off solutions and the lack of integration into their workflow. And so those are all challenges that we've kind of faced. There's something I would say, but it's not public yet, so I'm not going to say it. But there's a lot of still discovery to be had here. And we're still working through it. And, like Chris said, the aperture's wide open on what we're looking at. So if you've got something, please bring it to us. And I'd also say for Chris, for the last 5 years, innovation has done a lot of good things on the front end. But we would never be able to deliver those solutions to our veterans without the acquisition partners. They have been tremendous help for us in moving these things along across the enterprise. One of the solutions that we found during COVID is now at like 130 medical centers because of the partnership with Chris. So,
Just to add to that, historically, MTEC is, if you think in terms of priorities and where the monies have been spent, usually always infectious disease, regenerative, wound healing. You're going to see under the MTEC 2.0, since we've just been renewed, you're going to see that pie chart radically change with a focus on healthcare IT. Even though you're not seeing solicitations coming over the wall yet, we already anticipate forward front kind of thinking, meaning to have that chatbot AI assisted nurse that anyone on the field can deploy. So we're spending a great deal of energy thinking through these issues and beginning to identify you. When that day happens, we hope to have a stable of thoughtful companies and players that can help us implement and help our troopers in that capacity. So important question, important area, and we plan on investing in that area. Good question. Yes, yes, sir.
I don't think I need a microphone. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay. I'm Peter Doyle. I'm the president and CEO at First Precision. We're a precision contract manufacturing company, and I'm a veteran. I wonder, just broadly, if you could talk about how you look at the our return on investment at the VA for this program to streamline and help innovate. Do you measure it with patient outcomes, with agility, with contractual spend? And over what timeline do you expect in aggregate to see some of these programs?
I guess I'll take that one. So part of our challenges, and this is changing the game inside VA, is we never really understood what success looked like. And so part of our life cycle management, not just contract management, is to understand the business need, understand what the problem is we're trying to solve, or you all are helping us try to solve, and then understand what success looks like in whatever measures they may be, in OKRs or service level agreements, whatever it is, but something that's measurable and actionable, traditional metrics, 101. But for the end of the day, it's really, are you increasing outcomes of veteran health, and are you increasing access to veterans' health, healthcare, whatever the issue is. So it's really veteran-centric. It's I was going to close, and I'll close a little bit later, but around the idea of human-centered design and making sure that everything you do is around what I am mandating, I call the EII doctrine, easy to use, integrated, and intelligent. The system, you shouldn't need a PhD or an advanced degree to figure out how to use whatever widget or tool you're offering to us. It should be integrated. It should be something that is, like Kit said, it shouldn't be a one-off solution, but it should be something that can be scalable across the enterprise. And then finally, in today's day and age, it should be intelligent. Have some AI component in it, not AI only, but an AI-enabled component that allows predictive methodologies, some advanced intelligence with it. So those are the measures, and it's really unit-specific, but at the end of the day, how it improves access and outcomes to veterans is really our ROI, if you will. Financially, I'm coming from the other side, free is always the best thing for me, but in reality, it's whatever the cost is, we're not driven necessarily by cost unless it's compared to if you have a competitor of something. But new efforts, what you all offer, it's really about the access and outcomes of veterans.
And we're looking at that with every program. Each one's unique. Some are just plain cost centers. I mean, it's going to cost money to do this thing to get the veteran, the veteran outcomes you're looking for. So we just try to get at that thing at the best price we possibly can so that it's balancing against the rest of the VA portfolio priorities, right? But in other cases, there's an ROI. So in some cases, some of the innovations that come to us is in a way of buying or a way of approaching something. So when it comes to the Strategic Acquisition Center, when Kit's looking at that, that's not a question yet. Like that's hey, here's the whiz-bang cool thing. How do I turn that into a product line? But by the time it comes into the programmatics and the strategic acquisition part, now we're looking at what's the ROI going to look like? Is it patient outcomes, funding, savings, those sort of things, acquisition times? Yeah, we determine that at that point.
Yeah, the three things that we look at: access, outcomes, quality of life.
Yeah.
As a value-based care system, that's what we're concerned about our veteran population. Cost, it's important to be efficient and save money, but that's not our primary concern. We don't have the same kind of guardrails as the commercial world. And I'm glad, because our veterans deserve the best.
I think we had a question over here.
Hello, my name's Suzanne. My question is about doing business with companies outside the US, and is there any restrictions on where devices are manufactured?
There are, since I'm the senior accountable official for VA, there's a big Made in America push, and especially on PPE and some medical devices. So the rule is we have to buy American. And so, if you're a foreign resource, it's really about, do we have trade agreements, a Trade Agreement Act or a BAA or TA kind of effort. And I think it's really driven on can you manufacture in the U.S. with American materials, American goods. I think the rule is 55% of the system or product needs to be American made. I think it's moving up to 75, 85%. So, and I deal with Congress all the time, and I was also another closing thought is around, the law of unintended consequences. There's good ideas, but sometimes we just really can't get there today. So sort of like the CHIPS Act, there's a law that's coming in place saying that we can't have foreign-made chips in our laptops and other stuff, and it's like that's physically impossible today, but in the future it is. We'll get there. So if you're in the development stage, then kind of consider that there is indeed limitations to what we're allowed to buy.
So just to clarify, because it's really important to note, if it is not manufactured in the United States right now, but if it's Trade Agreements Act compatible, that aids in our ability to obtain it. So when you start certain dollar values, it goes from Buy American Act to Trade Agreements Act. So it does complicate it if we're going looking for something from foreign sources, but we have certain authorities if it results in a better outcome to still obtain it. But if you can manufacture in the United States, that clears the path a little bit. It makes it much easier. Yep.
That's coming next, FOCI, foreign-owned controlled interests. So we can't have the front companies that are go back to the mothership of certain foreign countries that we will remain nameless, that are based in America that actually are Not to mention, I think TikTok or some of those kind of companies. So.
Yeah, but again, it kind of comes down to the trade agreements countries. Is that makes that again clears the path a little bit. So, and if you look at the Trade Agreements Act webpage, you can see all the countries that are Trade Agreement Act compliant and those that aren't.
From a prototype standpoint, not acquisition, less restrictive. So we've invested in European, Israeli, and so forth. Radically different. We're not at that acquisition stage, so. There was a question back over here. Yes, sir. Two of them. In the back, please.
Yeah, Carl Gemberg, Emerging Medtech. Do you have any specific programs focused on value-based or outcomes-based pricing when dealing with acquisition?
In the prescriptions world, yeah, for pharmaceuticals in particular. I'm sorry?
How about devices?
No, not that I know of. No.
Hi, this is Jatin Maniar with Solish. We are a instant sleep apnea detection company. And you'd mentioned there are like the 6 priorities VA has. Outside of those, if there are other things, like how does that stack rank or is there a process for that?
No, sleep apnea is definitely a big one. Those 6 that I told you, those are VA specific priorities that we focus on. But there's other, issues like, like I said, diabetes is a big one. Sleep apnea, a lot of our veterans have sleep apnea. It's high on the list. It's probably in the top 10 if I had to say something. I mean, we're the largest single purchaser of sleep apnea devices.
And let's face it, even though there's priorities out there,
Yeah.
you have to keep all the plates spinning. Obviously, I mean that's kind of my challenge is that I've got the priority list and then I've got the basic business that still has to continue, and you still want to introduce innovation and better ways of buying things as you go. So of course, when you've got the priority programs like veteran suicide, things like that we're trying to get after, we turn the needle a little bit and do a couple more industry events, kind of speed up things, in that space wherever we can. But we're still spinning the plates. Nothing is going undone. That's the challenge. That's why the gray hair.
Round of applause for our distinguished Michael, Kit, Chris. Thank you again, and again, to echo what Michael's conveyed. If you see alignment or you have a question, please reach out, whether it be the VA or our initiative in the area of prototyping. We're all ears. What's best for our troopers? Thank you.